Assalamu alaikum. So this was our first Go program in our earlier tutorial. Well, in this tutorial, we'll see how to make HTTP request using a Go program, which will use a Postman and also a terminal to do that. And to get started, one of the first thing I want to do over here, inside this folder, actually, I'm going to create another folder. So right now I have 3 files over here inside this folder, go.mod, main.go, and my first go. Oh, of course, that's a binary file. Now inside this, I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it handler, because I want to separate the logic, which is a transport layer, which means that we should be responsible for communication. So I want to separate it from our main file, which is first.go. So let's go ahead and hit it. And inside this, right now we don't have anything. And what I'm going to do right over here, actually I could do cd handler, and then inside this I'm going to make a new file and I'm gonna call it http handler.go, just like this. So inside this over here, we'll see that we have a file which is http handler.go. Now, first thing we want to do over here, we want to give it a package name. The package name would be helpful if we want to access any of the functions or variables from other files like main.go. So I want to define over here a package name. So what would be our package name? You can actually name it anything you like. It doesn't really matter. And I'll call it HTTP layer. It's all up to you how you name it. So over here, we are going to create a struct and we'll call it my handler. And why we are going to do that? Because since we are going to work with HTTP request, actually we need router object and HTTP server, and those two objects together we want to put it in a class. We know that in Go, struct is like a class, so I'm going to have two variables or objects declaration over here. So the first one, I'll call it router, and then the type would be, and after that over here I'm going to create one HTTP object, and that would be from http.server. Now let's go ahead and click on this, and we need to import it, Gorilla Mask. Otherwise we'll have an error. Not only import it, we have to get the package. And hopefully it should be resolved, and I think it is resolved. And right over here, we also click on quick fix and we need to import it. And with this, our error is gone. Now my handler actually would be, my handler would hold these two variables, which means that if we create an object of my handler, we would be able to access those two objects like router and HTTP using dot operator. And this is what we are going to do very soon. So first, I'm going to create a new function over here, and I'm going to call it server provider. And then over here, it's going to return my handler. And why we are going to return my handler? Because from main.go, actually, we want to access this HTTP variable. So we have to create an instance of the struct and then return the instance of the struct, and which we'll do in main.go. Anyway, so now one of the first thing we want to do inside this function, actually initialize this struct as a constructor. As Go doesn't have the idea of constructors, so you have to do it in a function. So this is our function, and the function would return this struct. Anyway, so over here, I'm going to create a variable mh, and then over here, I'm going to call my handler. And right now, we'll keep it empty. Nothing is there, which we don't need to initialize anything. And after this, over here, mh.router. So this one. So we have to get the new router function to initialize it. So once we are done with initializing, actually we can over here just simply return mh. Now with this, the error should be gone. And one of the things we could do right away, we can come to our main.go and call this function. And how we do that? So let's come over here. And previously we had this hello world. Now right over here, we'll use this package name. What is our package name? Our package name is HTTP layer. So we have to write HTTP layer dot server provider. So let's go ahead and do that. and we'll save it in a variable, and the variable we'll call it mh, or you can call it server, it doesn't really matter. And then here we do http layer, which is our package name. Remember, this is the package name. And then over here we'll call server provider. Now right away we'll get tons of errors because first, this package is not recognized, it doesn't know where it is, so you have to tell it. And how to tell it? So over here inside this, right after first import, we have to do another import. Now to do import, you have to find your mod init name. Like for example, if you come over here, go.mod, and inside this you'll find your module name. What is your module name? Your module name is my first go, so we have to use this one. Let's go ahead and copy this. So I'm gonna put it here. Now after this, packages are actually referred using folder name. Now here, HTTP layer, actually this one is inside this handler folder. So right after this, we have to write handler. Make sure that you spell them correctly, and as you see, the both errors gone. Now over here it's being cranky and it is telling you, okay, well, you have declared it, but you didn't really use it, so why you are doing it? One thing we could do, we can just go ahead and remove this. Now with this, the error should be gone. We can save it. Now let's close this. Now let's come over here, http handler.go. Before we return, over here we could print a message, fmt.println. I'm trying to create a server. That's it. Over here, make sure that you import it at the top, otherwise you'll get error. Okay, now let's go ahead and save it. Now let's come inside this main.go, make sure that everything is as it is. And right over here, I'm going to run the command. So of course we need to come to our project root folder. So I'm going to step back and I'll make sure that I'm inside first go, which is first go, this one. And then over here, I'm going to run go build dot and go run dot. All right, so first we see over here hello world, great, and right after this we see trying to create a server, which means that over here this line is being called, and this is awesome. All right, now that means that our module, the package that we have created over here, we can access it from main.go and it's working fine. Now, since we are going to create HTTP router object, or we are going to actually call HTTP request or do HTTP request, so first we have to map our routes. And how to do that? Now over here, I'm going to create a function, and this function would be a receiver function. And who is the receiver? It's the handler over here. So I'm going to create over here an object of it. So I'm going to call it mh. And then over here, I'll have my handler, just like this. And of course, I don't want to call it like this, so I'm going to remove this. And over here, I'm going to call it map routes. Now, since we have this mh object over here, mh, so we can access this router object, which is this one, router. And then actually we can directly call handle func. So handle func actually takes an endpoint. So our endpoint would be hello. And right after this over here, we have to return a callback. Now this callback in general returns the data from the server. So over here, we are going to simply return like this. So here we would say fmt dot fprint, and then over here we'll have w. So make sure this is fprintf. Now we're gonna call this. So when we call this thing, actually this routes would be bounded, which means that we'd be able to find them when we call our HTTP request. So over here, we are going to simply call mh.maproutes. This is the function. All right. Okay, so with this, our router object has been created. And right now our routes are registered in our application. And after that, actually, we're going to go ahead and create a server. And how we do that? Now to create a server, one more time, we are going to use this mh object, the one that we created. And then from this, we're going to call HTTP over here. Now inside this, we have to mention our address, which would be our local address. But in this case, I'm just going to type in 127.0.0.1. And the port could be any number, any available port, this one. And after that, you have to assign a handler. And actually, this handler takes your route object. In our case, mh.router, this one, which is initialized, which is referring to the object over here. Now with this, we'll be able to create a server, and the server address should be this one. And server would also be able to find our router. Good. Now there's one more thing before we go ahead and use this one. And what is it? So actually we need to listen to this server. Right now we just created it, but actually it's not activated. So we need to activate it. That means listening to it. So over here, I'm going to create another new function, and I'm going to call it func. And then once again, it's going to take this mh object, and then that would be my handler. And then I'm going to call it my server. And inside this, we're going to access mh, and then we are going to access HTTP. And then after this, we are going to say listen and serve, just like this. Now, actually, it might return an error over here. So that's why here we do if error. We'll see if there is error or not. And if there is error, and we'll see if error is not equal nil. If error is not equal nil, then over here, we're simply going to return the error. Otherwise, inside this, we are going to return nil. Since we are returning error or nil, so we have to specify over here that we are returning an error. And if you do that with this, the error should be gone. Now let's come over here in our main.go. Now main.go, we already created this server, which is server provider, which is referring to this one. Now we have some changes over here. And as well as we know that we return an mh object, which is my handler object. So this time we are going to save it in a variable. And I'm going to call it mh one more time. It doesn't matter, you can call it anything. Now mh has receiver functions, and we know that mh has two receiver functions. One is map routes and other one is my server. So in this case, I'm going to call my server. Let's go ahead and save it. And after that, make sure your terminal is open. And this time we are going to run the command one more time. Now here we'll see that over here it says hello world and trying to create a server. And this time you do see that over here our terminal is still active, which means that actually our application is trying to listen to this address and this port. Beautiful. And how to verify that? So one of the way we could verify from here, so open up a new tab, make sure that you are inside the root of your project. And after that over here, you should write curl and HTTP. And then you write your local address, which is 127.0.01, and our port number was this one. And after that, we have this endpoint. Remember, what is our endpoint? Our endpoint is hello over here. And over here, we are simply going to hit enter. And here it says that this is a response from our server, which is this one. Awesome. Which means that we successfully created a server and we are able to listen to it. And then not only that, after that, we are able to return a response. Now, this is what we did over here from our terminal. We can also test it from Postman. Now, this is my Postman, and I'm going to create a GET request. So this is our local address and port, and this is our endpoint, and I'm going to hit enter. And here we see that, okay, this is a response from the server. Beautiful.